All right, welcome back everyone to Vuln Vibes. Today we're doing a deep dive on something pretty urgent actually. Juniper Networks just issued a fix for a vulnerability in their Junos OS that's being actively exploited.
Yeah, this one is definitely got our attention. It's serious enough that CISA actually added it to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog.
Which, as anyone listening knows, is basically a giant flashing neon sign saying, drop everything and patch this now.
Exactly.
So no need to bore our listeners with the basics. I think it's safe to assume everyone here knows their way around MITRE, ATT, and CK, kill chains, all that good stuff.
Right, we're all security pros here.
So let's skip the 101 and get right into analyzing the trends here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so first things first, the vulnerability itself is tracked as CVE-2025-21590. The short version is that it's an improper isolation issue, specifically within the Junos OS kernel.
And this is where things get a little hairy. Because essentially, that means a local attacker who somehow gets shell access, well, they suddenly have a lot of power, a concerning amount of power.
So just to paint a picture for our listeners, let's say an attacker manages to snag shell access, maybe through, I don't know, a phishing attack that slipped through or a weak password somewhere. What could they actually do with this vulnerability?
Oh, a lot, unfortunately. We're talking injecting arbitrary code. Like, that's the whole thing with this flaw. So think about it. Installing malware, siphoning off sensitive data, maybe even completely shutting down entire systems, all because the operating system itself isn't properly compartmentalized.
Yikes. And of course, to make matters worse, we're dealing with a kernel-level vulnerability here.
Exactly. This is about as deep down in the OS as you can get.
So it really is hitting at the very core of the system. Now, there's a sliver of good news here. Juniper's Security Incident Response Team, CERTEALs, they actually caught this exploit happening in the wild.
Yeah, which on the one hand is a huge relief. It means they're actively monitoring and caught this thing in action.
Right, exactly. It means they're on top of it, but also shows just how actively this flaw is being used out there.
Absolutely. It underscores the importance of that proactive security monitoring. Now, there's another small but important detail here. The vulnerability itself isn't exploitable from the Junos CLI.
Okay, that is a bit of relief, at least. Still, it really drives home the point about layered security, doesn't it?
No question. It's a good reminder that no single layer of defense is foolproof. You need multiple layers working together to really secure your environment.
For sure. And it kind of makes you wonder, is this just the tip of the iceberg? Is this a sign that we're going to see even more attacks like this popping up? You know, this whole thing reminds me a bit of what Mandiant discovered back in 2024 with UNC 3886.
Ah, that China Nexus espionage group.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And wasn't their whole thing targeting Juniper devices?
It was. And you know what's really interesting about that whole campaign? They were laser focused on older end-of-life Juniper hardware and software.
Oh, interesting. So basically, hitting those legacy systems that are often neglected and maybe not patched as diligently.
Exactly. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the latest and greatest, but those legacy systems, they're still out there. They're still vulnerable, and attackers know that.
And let's not forget, the back doors that UNC 3886 were using weren't exactly simple either. If I remember right, they were pretty sophisticated.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking custom, tiny shell-based backdoors with advanced capabilities.
Okay, so not just your run-of-the-mill backdoor then.
No, not at all. We're talking capabilities like disabling logging to cover their tracks.
Oh, wow. So that's even sneakier. It makes it harder to even detect that they're there in the first place.
Right, that's the point. They're trying to fly under the radar, stay hidden as long as possible. It's a different level of sophistication.
Yeah, definitely makes you think. I'm curious, turning this to our listeners out there, have you been seeing any similar attacks, especially targeting legacy systems in your environments? Be interesting to hear what you all are experiencing on the ground.
It's a good question, right? Because it's one thing to talk about this in the abstract, but what's really happening out there in real-world networks. And then there's the whole issue of patching. How do you actually balance patching everything that needs it with, well, keeping the lights on and actually getting work done?
Right, it's that constant struggle. But in this case, given how severe this vulnerability is and that it's being actively exploited, upgrading to a patched Junos OS version is, well, it's non-negotiable.
Agreed. There's no way around it. Now, in the meantime, restricting shell access is a good temporary mitigation. Just limit it to those users who absolutely need it.
Smart move. It's all about reducing that attack surface as much as possible.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Juniper has a tool specifically for this, the malware removal tool. or JMRT. It's a great resource for detecting and cleaning up any malicious code that might already be lurking in your network.
Right. Another good reminder. Always good to have those tools in your arsenal. And let's not forget about the deadline here. CISA set a deadline of April 3rd, 2025 for patching this vulnerability.
Which is coming up fast.
It is. So no time to waste. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the technical details of the vulnerability, how it ties into some bigger trends we've been seeing, and what you can do to protect yourself. But before we go, I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on. What proactive steps can organizations take beyond just patching to really harden their networks against these sophisticated, persistent threats, especially those coming from nation-state actors?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because patching is crucial, absolutely, but it's not a silver bullet. We need a more holistic approach to security, something that anticipates and adapts to the ever-evolving tactics of these really determined adversaries.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Stay vigilant, stay proactive, and we'll see you next time on Vuln Vibes.
Take care.